Good day, everyone. I am Kathleen Eve B. Medes, and together with my fellow groupmates, Joden Moscoso and Marian Tinya, we will be discussing one of the readings titled Cows, Pigs, Wars, and Witches The Riddles of Culture, a book written by Marvin Harris. And for our presentation, we will first discuss about the author and then the summary of the book and the theory or theories applied in the work. For the contents of the book, we will first begin with the mother cow and we will end with the return of the witch. The author of the book was none other than Marvin Harris, who was born on August 18, 1927 and died on October 25, 2001. Marvin Harris was known as an American anthropological historian and theoretician famous for his work on cultural materialism. His theory on cultural materialism prioritizes material conditions as more likely than ideas to be causal in human societies. Cultural materialism, as discussed by Lance and Mavi, was the theory that believes that the technological and economic aspects on the play the primary role in shaping a society. And for cultural materialists, they aim to understand the effects of technological, economic, and demographic factors on molding a societal structure and superstructure through scientific method or scientific um, approach. And so in this particular study, Marvin Harris had an empirical and scientific approach. And Marvin Harris was one of the proponents for cultural ecology that discusses that a society's culture tends to adapt or shaped by technology and environment. And it is environment that affects the culture and the social structure is dictated by technology and environment. It focuses on the human activities that are organized to satisfy the material condition. As I recall, that cultural materialism was an expansion of Marxist materialism, wherein it both focuses on the productive or the economic and reproductive, the demographic forces as the primary factors that shape society. The book was first originally published in 1974, and to give you an introduction about why is it titled The Riddles of Culture, at the first part, Marvin Harris chose the bizarre and controversial cases that seem like insoluble riddles, and he gave certain cases like or why the Pakiutol burn their houses, why Hindus do not eat beef, why the Jews and the Muslims hate pork, and the belief behind the messiahs and witches. So he asked the question, do these things have long-term practical benefit? And that's why in quoted text he stated that if you don't believe that a puzzle has an answer, you'll never find it. So his aim is to give the practical or down to earth explanations behind these seeming irrational beliefs and practices of a society. He discovered that lifestyles or the patterns of culture had definite and intelligible causes. And in this work, The Riddles of Culture, he gave practical explanations or material basis about society's myth, practices, beliefs, and culture. He said that things like this can really have intelligible causes. So, what he means by definite and intelligible causes, he said that these things had its explanations, or it is based on material conditions, because things are often overlooked because of a myth that only God knows the answer, and he gave a particular um, example of a myth that why a society's culture, or why a society's belief or practice has to be like this, because there is a myth that would rather explain that God gave every people a cup of clay, and from that they drank their life. They all dipped the cup in the water, but their cups were different. So, in Marvin Harris said that instead of valuing these elaborate spiritualized explanations of a cultural phenomena, we must look for the down to earth material ones. In this work, his stance is to demystify the superficial beliefs and uncover the reality behind these myths, practices, beliefs, and culture of a society, and give the practical or material uses to why these things exist in a society, and its benefits to the people and the structure of society. He said that lifestyles wrapped in myths and legends, whether impractical or supernatural, give people a social identity and sense of social purpose, but conceal naked truths of social life. For the first chapter, we have the mother cow, and this refers to the Hindus' love for cow to the point that they would rather starve than to eat their cows. First, let's us understand why or how do Hindu people have this kind of belief. So, um, for them, cow had a big significance on the Hindu life, because cow for in Indian society, for Hindu people, is a symbol of life. So this is a counterpart of Mary, the mother of Christ, to the Christians. And for them, cow is the symbol of all civilization, and its milk is what nurtures the people. And opposed to this belief is the activity of cow slaughter. So it violates the purity of this belief. And this was discussed already, that this is associated with their religion, their belief in reincarnation, that every living thing has its soul. So they cannot kill the cows because they believe that they have souls. And for them, killing a cow equates killing a person. It is a sin for them. And Marvin Harris stated the other implications of this, what he said, intense love of Hindus to cow, and this intense love for cows, which Marvin Harris termed as cow worship, has also implications in their society. First, cow worship causes hunger and poverty. Hunger because animal protein is very essential and in a human dietary needs, but Indian people refuse to eat due to the sacredness of cow in their religion. And it was stated that it lowers agricultural efficiency, and there were enormous numbers of surplus, useless, and uneconomic animals. And lastly, cow worship leads to riots and disorders in the community. So this was in one cases stated that um, between the Hindus and Muslims, Hindus condemns the Muslims who ate or consume beef. And for them, Muslims are cow killers. That's why Marvin Harris said that cow love does not stimulate the love of a man, because this causes conflict between people, and at one point it lead into a blooded riot between the Hindus and the Muslims. So there were instances where a group of people protested, and it leads to casualties wherein there were people killed, and there is a nationwide fasting among the holy men that stands for the ban on cow slaughter. However, the two mention implications such as lowering agricultural efficiency and surplus of uneconomic animals. Harris discovered that this is not directly cost of Kaolav, because he said that rather than a surplus, there is actually a shortage of animals through studying the oxen population. According to a survey, India has 60 million farms but only 80 million traction animals. So at least they needed 120 million traction animals for their 60 million farms. So that this oxen and adult male cattle that breed from cows um, are useful for plowing in the Indian rice or agricultural fields, but Marvin Harris clarified that this was not caused by cow love. Instead, what causes the lowering of agricultural efficiency in India is the privatization or private ownership of farms, livestock, flows, and ox carts. For instance, there is a farmer who owns an oxen and it falls sick, and the farmer now needs to borrow money that could lead him into debt, and it could escalate and forces him to migrate to the cities that are full of unemployed and homeless people. So for Marvin Harris, this is not directly caused by cow worship. Instead, it is the system existing in the India. And instead of surplus, there is a shortage of oxen, as I mentioned, and this oxen is their primary source for traction they needed for plowing their agricultural lands. Marvin Harris now identifies the practical benefits or uses of cows in the society. First of that, cows breed oxen that are versatile and can survive long period of droughts. So in the climatic condition of India, cow oxen is very preferable because with little food and water, they can still function, and they can be heard in long distances, and they are highly resistant to diseases. In a study, Indian cattle excrete about 700 million tons of recoverable manure. Recoverable because they can still have uses. For example, half of it is used by the Indian society as fertilizer for their agricultural land, and most of that goes to the materials used to generate heat for cooking. And the second one is cows and oxen provide low energy substitutes for tractors and tractors factories. This is actually true because Indian society or India cannot keep up with complex machinery and high industrialized tools and factories like the other societies have, for example, the Western societies. So they cannot keep up with that. So they use what they have in their environment that are provided by their environment, and that is the cows. And the third one, cow manure or cow dung can be used as fertilizers and burned to provide heat in cooking. So this was already mentioned in the previous discussion, and that cow dung paste is used as a flooring material. this is just a proof that cows really have practical uses to Indian society and to the people, because they can be used as a mode of transportation. They eat or feed in grass, and their excrement can be used as fertilizers or flooring material or cow dung to generate heat. And this is why they have a cow love. They treat cow as something to protect and to preserve, because cows really do have important benefits to them. And the other mentioned benefits is that cow love mobilizes people to resist cow slaughter, because killing cows means they are lowering their agricultural efficiency, which they could face long-term consequences. And next is that cows feed on pastures and food crops and some inedible byproducts. So in a way, cows are a big help to waste management, because they can eat inedible byproducts, and there was no competition between cattle and humans for land and food supply. And the next one, cow love mobilizes the latent capacity of human beings to persevere in a low energy ecosystem. And these were the following ways. First, preserving the dry or barren temporarily useful animals. Next is discouraging the growth of the energy expensive beef industry, which is, according to Marvin Harris, was an irrational for the Indian society to have, because switching from croplands to meat production could only result into higher food prices and deteriorate the substandard living of Indian people. Next is protecting cattle that fought in public or landlord expense. So actually, in the government, they provide old age home for cows, and they let cows wander around, and people could get fresh milk from them. And the last one, preserving the recovery potential of the cattle population during drought and famine. So they could have enough cows to utilize for their food production. According to Gandhi, an advocate of cow love and banning cow slaughter in India, said that cow love evokes small scale farming, vegetarianism, and non-violent, because they ban the killing of cows for their meat. So, behind this, Marvin Harris said that this sacred symbols and holy doctrines of this cow love or worship protects the farmer and the whole Indian society against industrialization, which is happening in the other societies, particularly the Western societies have um, that have high energy and complex agribusiness. And through this belief, they could protect cows, and they could have enough cows to utilize in their food production. And at the same time, it is low energy, and cows have a lot of material, practical uses in their households. So why would Indian society subscribe to complex industrialized machineries when they couldn't afford it, and they have cows to provide the same function for them. Marvin Harris made a comparison with the other societies, particularly like the US, who had higher standard of livings that results in greater productive efficiency, but there is an enormous increase in the amount of energy used per person, while in India it is lower. So, um, like it is evident, as I've mentioned, cows provide um, cow dung that can be used to generate heat for cooking. So instead of using like kerosene or oil, Indian people can use the material they get from the cows instead of the materials that take tens or million of years to generate. So Marvin Harris last stated in this part that if you want to see a real sacred cow, look at the family car. So this leads us to the point of this whole chapter that cow love is an active element in a complex, finely articulated material and cultural order. And Hinduism is a conservative force making the development of a higher energy and industrial modernization of the agribusiness in India difficult. So in short, they have this cow love or cow worship to protect themselves, to preserve cows, and to protect the whole Indian society against the industrialization that requires high energy that could lead to overusage of land resource. And this is a way for them to maintain the protection of the environment that provides them the means of living. For the next chapter, we have the pig lovers and pig haters. This refers to the abomination of pig across the history, why some people hate pigs, and in the contrary, why some communities find pig as the opposite, as divine and sacred, like the cows. The pig abomination or the pig hatred traces back way back in the Bible that the pig is regarded as unclean, a beast that pollutes if it is tasted or touched. And in the same manner, Allah, about 15 years ago, said to Muhammad and the millions of Jews, they shared this common idea of hatred or abomination towards the swine or pigs because they are unclean, they said. And in the contrary, there were some horticultural tribes in New Guinea and South Pacific Melanesian islands that treat pigs as a holy, sacrificial animals to declare war or make peace and to be eaten in all occasions such as marriages and funeral and for departed ancestors who crave pork. So unlike the first one, this group of people finds or treats pigs like the cow, but the difference is they are being sacrificed for reasons. It is said that there is a pig craving among the living and the dead, and that's why there are feasts that organize from time to time in this community. This is now the timeline of pig hatred or abomination. So before the Renaissance, pig is literally a dirty animal because it wallows in its own urine and eats excrement. So this pertains to pigs being physically dirty. Later on, according to Jewish Maimonides, God had intended the ban on pork as a public health measure for its flesh that has a bad, damaging effect upon the body. And later, in the mid 19th century, um, pig is hated because um, it can cause trichinosis when eaten undercooked. Now, Marvin Harris questioned this that how about the other animals? How about the cattle, goats, sheep that when consumed undercooked could lead to the same effects on health? So, due to these inconsistencies, the Jewish and Muslim theologians abandoned the search for a naturalistic basis. Harris preferred the Jewish notion that pig has a bad damaging effect upon the body. However, this truly originates in the Middle East where pig raising or pig farming was a threat to the integrity of the basic cultural and natural ecosystems of the Middle East. In the semi-sedentary Sedentary means it is a type of farming where people cultivate crops in permanent settlements or villages. It means they are non-nomadic and they just stay in their places. And farming villages of the Middle East, pigs were more of a threat than an asset. To give a brief history, Hebrews or the descendants were nomadic pastoralists. They herd sheep, goats, and cattle. And they turned more sedentary, which means um, they now settle in a place agriculturally oriented lifestyles. In this, they see pigs as a threat because of the certain characteristics of pig that makes it more unfit for their environment. So first of that is that pigs are inhabitants of forests and shaded riverbank. And next is pigs are omnivorous and direct competitor of a man. Unlike the cows that consume inedible byproducts, pigs consume the same as the man when it comes to land and food. And unlike the cows, pigs cannot produce milk, and they are difficult to herd over long distances. And because of they cannot sweat, they are thermodynamically ill adapted to hot or dry climate, which the Middle East had, and pigs are physically dirty. And that's why pig raising is seemingly difficult for the community of Middle East, and that's why there is a scarcity of shelter provided for pigs, and that's why pigs became more of a luxury, and pork became more of a luxury for them. And it is said that it is ecologically maladaptive to raise pigs. And concerning this characteristics of pigs, that they are ill adapted to the climate of Middle East, and cannot sweat. So they cannot sweat because they lack hair, and the higher the temperature, the dirtier they become. So that's why they they are physically dirty. And in the Bible, and in for the Muslim and for the Jews, they are unclean. This is the part where Marvin Harris stated that not all religiously sanctioned food practices have ecological reasons. Taboo serve social functions that help people to think themselves as distinctive community. Now we go to the other side, which is the pig lovers. Um, as I've mentioned, in some parts of the New Guinea and South Melanesian Islands, there are horticultural tribes that um, treats pig special. And for them, they are family members and an obligatory sacrificial entity and ingested on special occasions. There were ritual slaughter and sacred feasting that broadens the prospects for communion between man and beast. And there is a unity because they believe pig as a flesh of the human host, and the pig as a spirit into the spirit of ancestors. The Great Pig Feast occurs once or twice in a generation, and the reason why they held that Great Pig Feast is to satisfy the ancestors' craving for pork and to assure communal health and secure victory in future wars. So this is the reason why they have peace. And this this have further explanation in the book of Pig for Ancestors Ritual in the Ecology of a New Guinea People by Professor Ray Rappaport from the University of Michigan, where the relationship between pigs and pig-loving Maring, which is a tribe in the Bismarck Mountains of New Guinea, were studied. And this was the piece of evidence or the photo in which Professor Rappaport took with the Chambaga Maring clan in between the years of 1962 and 1964 while he was studying their culture. In the Chambaga clan, there are rituals. First, they have the Kaiko, which is a great festivity that occurs once every 12 years, lasting about a year, and the Rumbim ritual, that is a tree or seedling planting activity after the war. So the Maring people have these cycles or rituals they call. Let's begin by discussing the Kaiko. So Kaiko is a great pig festivity. So it is a massive slaughtering of pigs. And it occurs once or twice a generation, once every 12 years. And there are preparations, small scale sacrifices, and it lasts about the year. And after that festivity, they will now engage in war. After this warfare that will be discussed later, there is a truce and a rout. And after this, they plant the rumbim sampling or the seedlings. They plant it in the routed forest. Then now they proceed to raising more pigs. And with their pigs became overpopulated or there is the pig increase, of course, there's a pressure in their gardens. They now uproot their trees or the rumbim, and this initiates the Kaiko celebration. Overall, each part of this cycle makes up the self-regulating ecosystem that adjusts the size and distribution of the human and animal population to conform to the available resources and production opportunities in the Maring region. In the 1963 Kaiko celebration observed by Professor Rappaport, there were 169 pigs slaughtered for the 200 members of the Tsembaga clan. Their daily routines of work and settlement patterns determines the length of the cycle. And for the division of labor in this particular cycle is that for women, they were the pig raisers, or they were responsible for raising the pigs, and they, along with it, they cultivate um, their source of food, which is the yams, taro, sweet potatoes, and other plants in the forest. With this, they are the ones who were overburdened and the one who faces the pressure to increase their garden size as the number of pigs also increases. And that is, they ensure their garden size um, to have enough supply of foods for pig and for them and for until the next Kaiko. So for them, raising pigs is also like raising an adult human. In fact, they raise pigs as like their children. They tag them along in the forest and raise them until they became mature for the next Kaiko celebration. And marrying women were the ones who suffer the most, unlike the men. So the men's only task is to clear and burn the new gardens for the rumbim, and they were the ones who inspect the height or the growth of the rumbim or the trees they planted, and without counting the pigs, they now proceed to the kaiko. The production of food were highly dependent on the women's side. So in the 1963 Kaiko celebration, there was an estimated 3,000 people with 2,500 pounds of pork and fat, and wherein there were 12 pounds for each individual they could consume for 5 days. And the meat distribution they were distributed in in-laws and their military allies. And the purpose of Kaiko feast also ties with seeking alliance and loyalty to the allies. So the host invite their allies and they seek for assistance or loyalty in the future when they engage in wars. And for the allies' point of view, they seize this Kaiko as an opportunity to decide if their hosts are still powerful and worthy of their support. And they participate in rituals, and as a reward they use pigs as also to honor the clansman or tribesman in his retirement. So we proceed now to the material conditions or the practical benefits of why there is a pig love among in the context of the Kaiko or the Maring tribe. First is there is a pork craving because with it as a high quality source of animal fat and protein, it is needed in diet and meeting the nutritional standards. So Maring people get their foods from the forest and they usually consume yams, sweet potatoes, taro, and plant foods that serves as like their vegetables. Although it's healthy, but it does not entirely meet the nutritional standards that animal fat and protein could provide. It is considered to be more concentrated and metabolically more efficient, in especially the Maring people have but only vegetable based diet, so it is a way to satisfy their nutritional needs. In ecological sense, pig farming is ideally compatible in the temperature and humidity of the Maring region. So unlike the Middle East, Maring region have a perfectly suited environment to herd pigs or to raise pigs because they have forests or mountains, slopes that could be a perfect environment for pigs to thrive. However, there is a downside because of the unlimited growth of pig population leads to competition between man. Now, facing this, the Maring women were overburdened, gardens for subsistence were endangered, and agricultural system lowers because they have excess of pigs that could be their competitor of their source of food. So this is why now the Kaiko takes place. As I mentioned earlier, the purpose of the celebration includes to satisfy the ancestors. So behind that is also their way of seeking defense and for them for their survival. And next is removing the parasitic animals. So this refers to the pig surplus. When pigs were overpopulated, they could provide more foods to the pigs rather than to themselves. And now, stabilizing pig population. So Kaiko is a way for them to lessen the pig population that could be the threat to their means of subsistence and their survival as a population. This leads to Marvin Harris posing a question that why not set a limit on the number of pigs grown for marrying women? So this actually depends on the population of the home region, the physical and psychological vigor, the secondary forest and condition and intentions of the neighboring enemies. It seems like they have to consider these things concerning the alternative way of limiting the population of pigs. So this leads us to the key points or the main points of Marvin Harris for this chapter, that the Kaiko and Rumbim cycle or ritual guarantees an efficient distribution of plants, animals, and people in the Maring region, which is after the war, nagkakaroon ng truce or break. So doon, na-heighten din yung cravings nila for pork. And speaking of warfare, it is not caused by pig love. Now we proceed to the third chapter, which is primitive war. That is, according to Marvin Harris, due to lack of alternative solution to certain problem, alternative solutions by the primitive people that could involve less suffering and premature deaths. So, in short terms, this was their solution to address a problem that they lack alternative solutions, and they only resort into this activity because they have at that point, that certain point of time, they lack alternative solutions. According to Rappaport, previously friendly clans waged wars to avenge violent acts which include the abduction of women, rape, pig shooting, crop theft, poaching, and death or disease through witchcraft. This is the common reasons for them to engage in war. And in the Maring clan, warriors went with a desire to kill specific members of the enemy group, and through Kaiko, they hope to demoralize their enemies. We are now back to the context of Kaiko celebration in the Maring. So, through this feast, they hope to demoralize or dispirit their enemies. So it is a way of parang intimidation towards their enemies. So the fight ground or the setting of wars were commonly in the unforested area and borderland, and it happened upon an agreed date. So nagsiset sila ng date kung kailan. And usually, if ibabalik natin doon, after ito ng 1 year of the Kaiko celebration. During the fight, as soon as someone gets killed, there is 1 to 2 days truce or break that happens where all warriors return to carry out funerary rituals and or praise their ancestors. But if the casualty or fatalities is even, they return back to the fight ground. The stronger forces chases the weaker clan, who now flees with their movable possessions to their allies' villages. So, kapag yung malalakas na tribe is natalo na yung mahihina, automatically, kinukuha nila yung mga kaya pa nilang maisalba, papunta na sila doon sa mga kakampi nilang tribes din. Now, the victor group sweeps the village of the defeated one, wherein they burn houses, they kill people they can still find, and destroy their crops and abduct pigs. They carry out to their villages, and now after the war, they now proceed to Rumbim, or they plant the new Rumbim, and this initiates a prolonged truce. But one thing is they do not occupy the lands of their enemies or the lands of the weaker defeated groups. Meanwhile, the defeated group merge with their allies, then they settle farther away from their enemies' borders. Marvin Harris asked another question: is it because of the population pressure? For the ecologists, this is what they call the carrying capacity of the region or the environment, because primitive societies um, have institutional mechanisms for restricting or reversing population growth well below carrying capacity. So in comparison to the pig population, they raise pigs. When pigs are high number, they now proceed to kaiko. So, like the primitive people, they have reasons to wage war, but behind it is the also it also concerns with the carrying capacity. They need to go to war because it is a way of their cut-off mechanism on the population growth. With this being said, warfare is a cut-off mechanism that helps to keep human populations in a state of ecological equilibrium with respect to their habitats. In marine, warfare breaks out at a point where production and consumption of pigs and human population escalates. Among the primitive people, warfare is an ecologically adaptive lifestyle, unlike the modern ones that is caused by innate human killer instinct with nuclear weapons that might lead to self-annihilation. So for Marvin Harris, the next adaptive advance of the humanity is the demolition of war itself and nuclear weapons. The regulating effect of war was not evident in combat deaths as it did not alter the population growth. And the uh, particular example of this is when the World War II in Russia, 10 years after the population recuperated, ibig sabihin, nakabalik din naman siya. And it was back on the curve, the same with Vietnam. And that population rose steadily. According to Frank Living from University of Michigan, this generational slaughter, they have no effect on the population or growth size. The reason for this is women. Average woman fecund or capable of reproducing can give birth 8 to 9 times during 25 to 35 years she can bear children. So, in conclusion, all war-induced deaths remain below 10% of population and slight increase in number of births per women. So women can cover up the deficit of the population in just next few years. So back in the Marine warfare, there is a data telling that there were 14 male killed and 6 females and 3 children out of 300. So even if 75% of adult males were killed, the surviving females could make up the deficit in a single generation. And marrying being a polygynous, which means men can have several wives. And for normal human male, he can have 4 to 5 fertile women. So with this, women are regarded to be the beast of the burden for being the main gardeners, pig raisers, heavy work. So the higher the women population, the higher their overall efficiency of food production. Contrary to the Maring men, aside from burning the forest and minimal contribution to subsistence, they, um, according to Marvin Harris, they're like the pigs. They consume more than they can produce. The warfare in the ecological sense preserves the marine ecosystem through the following. First, the local groups are forced to abandon their prime garden areas at a point below the carrying capacity, and then increases the rate of female infant mortality. To extend the reasons further is first, for the abandonment of prime garden lands, it helps to maintain the carrying capacity of the region. In 1953, when the Kondigai tribe defeated the Tsembaga, the Kondigai caused destruction but fear the Tsembaga's ancestor goes. So they return and do a ritual for protection. And the ritual involves hanging up magic fight stones inside a sacred shelter and not take it down until they thank their ancestors at the Kaiko. With this, they also refrain from gardening or hunting on the Tsembaga territory. As a result, Tsembaga can reoccupy it for cultivation, forcing the forest to sustain more pigs and people above carrying capacity causes destructive consequence on the part of the marine for survival. With this, Marvin Harris was amazed by the following of garden for 10 to 12 consecutive years before they can be burned and replanted without danger of being degraded into grasslands. And it coincides with the pig festival that occurs twice or every 10 to 12 years. So this poses a question that when do the Maring have enough pigs to thank the ancestors? And this was the answer. They have enough pigs when the forest has grown back over the routed group's former garden area. So, bago sila nagpo-proceed sa Kaiko celebration, they made sure that the forest has grown, it regenerates after they have uprooted or burned it for about 10 to 12 years ago. Maring people lives by eating the forest, which is they get their subsistence in the forest. They burn trees and plant crops in the um, ashes. And the ritual cycle and ceremonialized war prevents the Maring people from consuming or eating too much of the forest too fast. So it is their way of restoring what they have taken from the forest. They wait for 10 to 12 years before proceeding to the Kaiko and the war once they have enough, or once the forest they have burned or they have uprooted has grown to its original state. With the rooted group draws back, it permits regeneration of forest cover in endangered sectors where they and their pigs have consumed. So, for example, dun sa Tsembaga clan, nadipit sila nung Kondigai. The Kundigai now burn the forest and plants the new Rambim. So, meanwhile, yung Tembagakla naman is nandun sila sa mga allies nila and they abandon their prime garden which is na-consume na nila para which is already consumed by them. So this is their way of restoring the forest they have consumed too much, and they have to wait for 10 to 12 years to uproot it and proceed to Kaiko and for the next war, and then the cycle repeats. So there is this cycle. The good thing in this cycle is that they have time, or they wait for the right time to restore or consume the forest which they depend on their survival. So there is an ecological state of equilibrium. The Kondigai, hindi nila ino-occupy yung land ng Tembaga, and that is an opportunity for the Tembaga clan to use it for production again. And with the assistance of their allies, and when they raise enough or raise many pigs, when the pig population approaches the maximum, victors took down the magic fight stones. They now approach the Rumbim and enter the unoccupied and newly generated territory peacefully if their former enemies are still too weak to engage, and vengefully if they move back. So for example, 'di ba, after the war is naghang muna ng mga magic fight stones yung Kundigai. So if they check now the uprooted lands, if nakabalik na sa dati yung state ng forest, is ready na sila i-occupy yon for their territory, and they could resort into violence if bumalik doon yung mga Tsembaga clan. Marvin also said that pigs acquire a ritual sanctity since one adult pig eats like an adult human in the forest. Pig slaughter also equates to like reducing a man, and only females can nurture or raise the pigs. So this corresponds to the second cause of war, the female infanticide. And this is also the practice which many primitive people follow too, as a means of population control, wherein there is a rearing of males than females to in order for them to have stronger military force. And biologically, women are valuable for the child fertility. However, in the armed conflict involving hand weapons, men were preferred, and warfare obliges the limiting of nurturance of female infants. This also poses another question of why not limit the population by birth control. So Marvin Harris pointed out that no, because prior to condoms being invented in the 18th century, there were no safe, pleasurable, and effective contraceptives. And the other peaceful means of lowering the high population is abortion, which is unpleasant and risky for women. And in this primitive practice of infanticide, ang ginagawa ng mga dun sa Amaring, female infants were suffocated or left in a bush unattended. And they also neglect their infant care rather than they assault their female babies. And for ways of abortion, they drink poison, they wrap tight band around their abdomen, and the harsh way is when another person will continuously jump at the back. With this reason, primitive people focus on the institutionalized means of population control on the alive individuals. So the logical victims of this are the children. Because they have no resistance, there is less social and material investment, and there is an easier emotional detachment. And here are the points of this um, whole chapter. Primitive war has been part of an adaptive strategy associated with particular technological, demographic, and ecological conditions. And Maring's ritually time cycle of war, Rumbim peace, and pig slaughter has helped in protecting the habitat. And as a means of population control, the cycle is a clever trick on the part of the ancestors to get the Maring people to breed pigs and men instead of women to protect the forest. So to cover up, they need this entire cycle, the kaiko, the war, the rumbim, for them to maintain and protect their um, environment in which they depend on their subsistence. And warfare is actually their cut-off mechanism at the time to limit their population growth and to maintain a state of ecological equilibrium in their environment. The theory or theories applied in the first three chapters concerning the cows, pigs, and primitive war were the theory of cultural materialism and ecology. For it is said cultural materialism for the cows because there were the three structures identified in the belief of India and its material basis or material conditions concerning that belief. And the three structures are identified as the infrastructure in the context of cows. Cows have practical uses in households and Indian farmers affixing to low energy based agricultural production. So, infrastructure which pertains to their mode of production, which is um, in terms of agriculture, they have cows as their tool to utilize it or to provide them their food or source of their production. And for the structure or the institutions involved in channeling or maintaining this infrastructure is the Indian government when they passed a Bill of Rights for cows, and other institutions were engaged or created to ban total cow slaughter because the cows are very essential for their food production. The superstructure above this too is the Hinduism, which is the religion of the Indian people. encompasses the belief in reincarnation and cows as a symbol of life. Cows being a symbol of life also means they're very essential for their subsistence or survival as a whole community or as a whole country. And from an ecological viewpoint, cows are significant in protecting the Indian society from a high energy and complex agribusiness that could result in higher food prices and deteriorate their substandard living. So, in a ecological sense, cows, common in their environment, serves as their tool to utilize in their food production, and cows play a significant role in their survival and actually helps them to maintain this system of low energy based agribusiness in comparison to the um, industrialized complex machineries of the other societies, which requires higher energy or higher amount that they could not provide. This is their way of protecting themselves against this effects of industrialization, and they maintain they have their ecological equilibrium through having this system of production and worship. In the case of the pig love, or in the case of the Maring clan, Maring tribe practices pig farming and cultivation as their mode of production. And with that, the division of labor is marrying women were in charge of pig raising, while men were responsible for the rumbim or tree uprooting that initiates the pig feast or kaiko. So the superstructure covering it is their belief in ancestor spirit. That's why they have kaiko and rumbim. And this cycle is mentioned as their self-regulating cycle to maintain their ecological state of equilibrium in their ecosystem, because men is equivalent to pig and pig is equivalent to men, and they need to balance each other out to um, for their subsistence and for their survival. And in another ecological viewpoint, Maring region had an ideal environment for pig farming, and the Kaiko and Drumbim cycle allows an efficient distribution of means of subsistence such as the plants and animals for the people in the region. This, as I've mentioned, the cycle, they need the cycle to in order for them to have or maintain or regenerate again their source, which is their environment. They need to lower the population through warfare or pig slaughter in order for them to have or to have enough food supply they need for survival. For the third topic, the same theories were applied. And for the mode of reproduction for the primitive people like the Maring, they engage in war and practice infanticide because it is their means of lowering the high population and stabilizing it. And for the specific roles is that men were the ones participating in war while women neglect their female babies. And their belief also ties with the ancestor ghost and magic pipe stone. So as I mentioned, this belief helps them to do a ritual and plant a new rhombim or tree for the uprooted lands of the forest. Basically, they they are it is their way of um, giving time to restore the original state of the forest, or to regenerate it, to give them means of subsistence. And warfare is an effective population control, whereas primitive people rear male children to have stronger military force, causing a higher mortality rate of female children. The concern here is the effective population that corresponds to the carrying capacity of the region. So they need to resort to these practices in order for them to maintain that system, or to restore their what they have destroyed, and to regenerate what they have consumed in the environment. It is their way of staying in an ecological state of equilibrium. So that ends my part.